The childhood trauma of an INFJ often takes on a unique and deeply internalized form. INFJs are driven by introverted intuition and extrovert feeling, and they experience the world with a profound depth of emotion and insight. From a young age, INFJs are highly sensitive to their surroundings, capable of detecting emotional undercurrents that others might miss. This sensitivity, while a gift in adulthood, often renders them vulnerable in childhood, especially in environments that lack emotional safety, affirmation, or understanding. Check out our newly released INFJ Playbook. The link is in the description of this video. For many INFJs, trauma doesn't always come in the form of overt abuse or neglect. Rather, it can come from emotional invalidation, misunderstanding, or subtle forms of neglect that others might overlook. An INFJ child who repeatedly hears that they are too sensitive, too quiet, or too serious may internalize these messages as evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with them. Their deep emotions and inclination toward reflection may not be nurtured or even noticed, leaving them to navigate childhood feeling unseen or unvalued. This emotional invisibility can lead to what many INFJs describe as a sense of otherness, or being fundamentally different from their peers. They might struggle to find genuine connection with others, particularly if their peers are more extroverted or emotionally superficial. As a result, many INFJ children retreat inward, creating rich inner worlds filled with stories, ideals, and imagined relationships that offer the understanding and safety missing in the external world. While this inward turn is a coping mechanism, it also reinforces the isolation they feel, making it harder for them to reach out or trust others with their authentic selves. Family dynamics can further complicate things. If raised in households where emotional expression is dismissed, INFJ children may learn to suppress their feelings entirely. Their extrovert feeling function, which naturally seeks harmony and attunement with others, can be turned inward, leading them to take on the role of emotional caretaker far too early in life. They might become the peacemaker in the family, the one who senses everyone else's emotional states and tries to mediate conflicts, often at the cost of their own emotional needs. This premature emotional labor fosters an identity based on self-sacrifice and hypervigilance, traits that echo into adulthood. To make things worse, INFJ children may not be believed or validated when they express distress, especially if their experiences don't align with what others can see. Because their pain is often quiet, subtle, and complex, caregivers and teachers may underestimate its severity. An INFJ child may cry alone in their room, journal about feelings they can't name, or absorb family dysfunction without ever speaking a word about it. Their trauma, therefore, can become deeply embedded and unspoken, a quiet ache that is never recognized but always present. The long-term effects of such trauma include a persistent struggle with boundaries, an overdeveloped sense of responsibility for others' feelings, and difficulty trusting others with their inner world. Many INFJs grow up believing that their worth is tied to their usefulness, particularly their emotional supportiveness. They may experience intense guilt when prioritizing their own needs, and can develop patterns of people-pleasing that erode their sense of self. INFJs are old souls. Even as children, they often exhibit a striking emotional intelligence and a tendency to reflect on life in ways that seem far beyond their age. But this depth can also isolate them. Adults may praise them for being so good or so easy, failing to recognize that what they're seeing is not peace, but suppression. INFJs quickly learn that their emotional needs can make others uncomfortable or may go unnoticed altogether, so they adapt. They start editing themselves. They become experts in emotional masking, projecting calm, understanding, or happiness even when they're quietly unraveling inside. When an INFJ child experiences trauma, whether it's emotional abandonment, the unpredictable moods of a parent, constant invalidation, or being forced into roles they weren't ready for, the result isn't always external rebellion. Instead, INFJs internalize the trauma. They assume responsibility for it. They believe, sometimes unconsciously, that if they had only been more lovable, more helpful, more perfect, the pain wouldn't have happened. This self-blame becomes a narrative they carry into adulthood, affecting relationships, self-worth, and even the ability to trust happiness. A painful aspect for many INFJs is that their trauma often involves the loss of idealism. As natural idealists, they often hold high hopes for love, family, and harmony. When those ideals are broken, especially at a young age, it's not just the experience itself that hurts, but the shattering of belief in goodness, safety, or meaning. They can lose faith in the idea that emotional connection is safe or lasting. This creates a deep ambivalence. They long for intimacy but fear its costs. They may build walls, yet ache for someone to see through them. They may test others quietly, waiting to see if someone is safe enough to share their inner world with, while bracing for rejection. This can also show up in the INFJ's relationships. Many INFJs who experience trauma in childhood find it difficult to speak up, especially when it involves asserting needs, expressing anger, or asking for support. Speaking up often didn't work when they were young. It may have been met with minimization, ridicule, or worse, emotional withdrawal from the very people they depended on. So silence becomes a survival strategy. Over time, this silence becomes so ingrained that they may not even know what they need anymore. They can become strangers to their own desires, shaped more by who others expect them to be than by who they are. The trauma also often conditions INFJs into the role of the emotional sponge or empathic fixer. Because of their strong Fey function, they feel what others feel. In dysfunctional environments, this often translates to becoming the emotional anchor for adults who should be providing stability, not needing it from a child. The INFJ learns to read moods, anticipate others' reactions, and soothe emotional turmoil before it explodes. This emotional labor, expected or subtly enforced, teaches them that love is earned through caretaking, and that their own pain must always come second. This distortion of love becomes one of the most difficult patterns for INFJs to unlearn. As they grow older, these early wounds can manifest in specific patterns: hypervigilance in relationships, a tendency to self-abandon, chronic guilt, emotional burnout, or difficulty setting and enforcing boundaries. INFJs may become perfectionists, trying to earn the love and safety they never received. Or they may isolate, believing that no one will ever truly understand them. Even their desire to help others, a hallmark trait, can sometimes be rooted more in trauma than in pure altruism, driven by a subconscious belief that their worth depends on being useful. Trauma can also deeply affect an INFJ's relationship with their intuition. Normally, their intuition is a powerful guide, helping them sense truth, spot inconsistencies, and navigate emotional landscapes with uncanny accuracy. But when raised in environments where gaslighting, emotional invalidation, or manipulation occurs, INFJ children often begin to mistrust their own perceptions. If a parent tells them they're imagining things, overreacting, or being dramatic when they sense something is wrong, they begin to disconnect from their inner knowing. This internal conflict, feeling something deeply but being told it's not real, can lead to chronic self-doubt in adulthood. INFJs might become overly reliant on external validation or remain paralyzed by indecision, always fearing their instincts will lead them astray. Another hidden wound carried by INFJ children is the trauma of emotional enmeshment. In families where emotional boundaries are blurred or where a parent leans on the child for emotional regulation, the INFJ becomes a surrogate partner, therapist, or confidant. While this might look like a close bond from the outside, it is deeply damaging. The child's needs are overshadowed by the adults, and the INFJ, driven by Fey, may not even realize the exploitation taking place. They grow up believing their role in relationships is to fix, to listen, to absorb. As adults, they may find themselves drawn to people who need rescuing, and they often measure their worth by how indispensable they are to others' emotional well-being. There is also the trauma of abandonment, not always physical, but emotional abandonment. The INFJ may have had physically present parents who were emotionally absent or preoccupied with their own struggles. In such an environment, the child learns that their emotions are not important, that expressing pain only results in silence, or that affection is conditional. This abandonment is insidious because it doesn't leave scars on the surface. It leaves a hollow ache that says, "I am alone in this world, even when surrounded by others. INFJs, with their sensitivity, feel this abandonment not just as a lack of presence, but as a loss of potential connection, of the relationship that could have been but never was. And then there is the trauma of shame. INFJs often internalize a sense of being too much or not enough, too emotional, too intense, too strange, or too idealistic. They may remember moments when they cried and were laughed at, when they shared a dream and were told it was unrealistic, when they asked for help and were ignored. These moments accumulate and turn inward. Shame becomes a quiet voice that says, "You're a burden," or "You don't belong." INFJs rarely express this directly. They carry it in their posture, in their hesitancy to open up, in the way they downplay their needs or accomplishments. Many INFJ children develop an early awareness that they are different. This sense of difference isn't always visible to others, but it's keenly felt inside. While other children may seem to move through the world with ease, laughing loudly, forming groups, expressing simple wants and needs, INFJs often feel like outsiders looking in. They may ask deeper questions, perceive things that aren't openly spoken, or show a level of compassion and seriousness that adults interpret as maturity. In reality, this maturity is often a response to trauma or emotional abandonment. The INFJ adapts quickly, trying to fill in the emotional gaps around them, sensing the needs and unspoken feelings of others as a survival skill. When the adults in their lives fail to meet them with equal emotional depth or presence, the INFJ learns to turn inward. This internal world becomes both a sanctuary and a prison. It's where they go to process what they can't say aloud, to give shape to feelings that are too large or too complex for their environment. But it can also be a place of exile, where loneliness is magnified and their true selves remain hidden, even from those closest to them. This duality, of hiding while yearning to be found, is a core part of the INFJ trauma experience. Yet within all this pain lies the seed of the INFJ's greatest strength, their capacity for transformation. INFJs are natural alchemists of emotion. They have the ability to take the pain they've endured and turn it into insight, art, healing, and empathy. When they begin to untangle the threads of their trauma, not by pushing it away, but by finally allowing it to be seen and honored, they often experience profound personal growth. They begin to reparent themselves, to create the kind of emotional environment they were denied. They learn to say no, to recognize their limits, and to protect their energy not as an act of selfishness, but of survival and self-love. The healing journey for an INFJ is deeply spiritual. It's about integration, about no longer compartmentalizing their inner world from their outer expression. It's about shedding the roles they were forced to play and stepping fully into the person they were always meant to be. The child who once sat quietly, aching to be understood, is still there. And when the INFJ begins to speak not just for others, but for that inner child, when they begin to offer themselves the same compassion they so freely give, the transformation becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Check out our newly released INFJ playbook. The link is in the description of this video.